This is Saving America with your host, Dr. David D. Schein, author, professor, attorney, and all-around useful person, presenting the intersection of business and politics. Enjoy common sense commentary and interviews with some of the world's most interesting people. Now here's your host, Dr. David D. Schein.
Thanks, John, for getting our show launched today. We're kicking off this edition of Saving America with my weekend review commentary. As Iran works itself into the next phase of the war and the stock market continues its roller coaster, what else is going on? Political earthquake in California, maybe. Sudden jobs uptick. American injustice. Let's take a closer look at these and other hot stories for week 24 of 2026, followed by my interesting guests this week. Political earthquake in California, maybe. For my commentaries, I do my best to make sure I have the latest facts. Due to updated news sometimes coming in after I get the story out there, stories can change. So with that, let me talk about the disgraceful, total mess called California and its highly questionable voting system days after the primary elections. The public is still not certain who won the two ridiculously expensive and highly nationally publicized races. Those are, of course, the primaries for California governor and Los Angeles mayor. I strongly support Trump's Save America Act, time to have honest elections nationwide. For California Governor, Republican Steve Hilton, a former member of the conservative news media, was hailed as having a lead through much of the election cycle. California has this crazy deal called a jungle primary, which means all the candidates are on one ballot and the two top performers end up in the final election in November, unless one gets over 50%, and then they win immediately. Doing primaries like other states for the GOP and Dem candidates would make a lot more sense. Solidly in the race was Sheriff Chad Bianco, another Republican. While highly unlikely, some even theorized there would be two GOP candidates in the November governor's race. I was even getting excited for the locals in California as they are in desperate need of a change, with gas prices averaging $6.50. The locals are getting hammered and nowhere else to go in these tough times. Things have changed quickly on the Dem side. The early California lead was the Dem clown Swalwell, good old Swalwell, who had resigned from Congress due to pressure regarding alleged misconduct. Apparently, more came out and he pulled out of the California race. This left a black hole. Then, to fill the gap, there was a big money race on the Dem side between former Biden administration official Xavier Becerra and rich guy Tom Steyer. Even in what is considered a blue state, Hilton seemed to have managed all of this. Then we get to Election Day with only 50% of the votes in by the day after, and it takes an incredible, ready for this, 37 days for California to record votes. That's insane. It's a very sketchy deal. Right now, Becerra has edged out Hilton for the lead, followed by Steyer and Bianco. I do feel that due to the diversity in California and the competition among the many Dem candidates, Hilton is solid for the general election. Keep in mind that so-called deep blue California has elected Ronald Reagan and Arnold Schwarzenegger as governors. Although Schwarzenegger turned out to be a rhino, Republican in name only. So Hilton has a shot since it's possible for Hilton to win in nearly everything outside of the big city centers. Now, not so rosy in the city of Los Angeles. Incumbent Dem Mayor Karen Bass was expected to do well, despite being a terrible mayor for America's second largest city. She's just another corrupt anti-ICE liberal. Her record is a mass of homelessness and the disastrous fires. It just goes to show you how deep corruption can go when it comes to incumbent candidates. Enter on the GOP side the outlier Spencer Pratt, a 42-year-old reality TV actor who lost his home in the deadly Palisades fires. He appears to have come in second at this time, but they keep counting votes, and none of them seem to be for Pratt. I mean, none of them. So another Dem Nissev Rahman may sneak into second slot. I cannot say and will not say without proof that this is likely election fraud. All that I will say is that if Rahman edges out Pratt, I am glad the FBI is already involved. Many people have compared this to rolling a dice if we follow percentages and say each candidate has a roughly 1/4 chance to earn a vote, 100% probability that the votes don't tally differently, or at least in that 25% range for each candidate. So, for election tallies to come in this way is a mathematical improbability. This seems that to occur regularly with Democrat candidates, just like with Biden in the 2020 election. Remember, that's when the United States magically woke up with him finding thousands of unexplained votes in Michigan. Now, why does Dr. Dave have a problem with mail-in voting, you may ask? The problem is the voter registration system and the mailing of improperly supervised mail-in ballots makes fraud incredibly easy in California and other states that have sloppy mail-out ballot systems. The recently disclosed hospice scandal in California proves that where the system leaves space for graft, it tends to happen. And when you have millions of dollars on the line and when corruption can occur, generally it will occur. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney for California have announced they are already investigating possible election fraud in California. Of course, I'm not going to hold my breath on this. There's lots of investigations and accusations. There are a dime a dozen. Time for people to start going to prison. I saw an interesting article noting time to get votes tallied in different countries. Believe it or not, 2 hours in the large country of Brazil to get a final vote tally, 4 hours in another country. However, in contrast, California, which is the size of a small country, with only 10 million votes, it takes them 37 days. My opinion is that the longer they allow vote counting in any jurisdiction, the more likely it is that the votes are being manipulated. So why is California in play and in the news? Newsom's administration went from a $21.4 billion surplus to a continuing budget deficit of $20 to $35 billion each year in the future. How's that for a start? So the state is broke. The usual Dem response is raise taxes and raise them high, and not only on the rich, all the citizens of the state. Then enter the anti-business attitude, which has resulted in what is called domestic out-migration. This means American citizens are moving to other states. I guarantee you this is not the homeless leaving. Further, corporations are fleeing in record numbers. Tesla moving to Texas is a great example. And the latest dumb idea is a desperate plan to bail out the state's finances with a so-called wealth tax. Not only that, it might be made retroactive to the first of the year. I believe that last provision violates the U.S. Constitution. Of course, that won't stop California from trying to raid other people's pocketbooks. Billionaires in particular have been fleeing the state already due to the high taxes. This could close them out entirely. Then the middle class will be the ones stuck with this albatross. That's for sure. Other reasons: a third of the nation's welfare recipients and nearly a third of the homeless live in just that one state, California. Almost a quarter of the state's population lives below the poverty line. Its green energy policies and high taxes have consistently produced the highest gasoline and electricity prices in America. A very recent example of how bad it is to live in California is the cost of insurance. Some California homeowners are now being offered homeowner policies with a wildfire deductible. Think about the chronic failure of the state to do proper forest land control, which is the real cause of these now routine forest fires. I saw a report indicating that one homeowner was being charged a deductible for wildfires of an incredible $621,000, in addition to the regular homeowner deductible of an incredible $100,000. That means the resident would be out of pocket almost $750,000 before the insurance would pay anything. How many of you could take that much of a hit? And yet, the state of California is beautiful. Coastlines and natural beauty would make many other states jealous. I lived there briefly early in my corporate career. For many years, San Francisco was my #1 American city to visit. That stopped over a decade ago. not ruined by earthquakes or other natural disasters, but by power-crazed, dim politicians. And let me close out this segment with a great American quote from a brilliant man named Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. I hope a solid number of California voters, including the ones in Los Angeles, decide not to be fooled again. Sudden jobs uptick. The jobs report of 172,000 new jobs for May provided some good news for the Trump administration. Adding to the good news, March and April hiring were also adjusted by 93,000 jobs, producing an average addition of 188,000 jobs a month. For the 3-month period, that's the best in 3 years. The unemployment rate held steady at 4.3%. Now, I do feel that these numbers may be subject to manipulation. It seems to be popular with the politicians. A special concern of mine is hiring in the public sector. For May, for instance, local governments added 52,000 jobs. That's a huge part of the total hiring for May. I again encourage all taxpayers to fight for layoffs and hiring freezes for public sector jobs at all levels. It's subject to bloat, in my opinion. Time to cut it down. What I'm seeing is a fair, not great job market. I'll keep tracking this. However, on the same day this jobs report came out, the stock market crashed in record levels. Especially hard hit was the tech-heavy NASDAQ, which set a new one-day record for losses at $1.7 trillion in market value. So, good news means that the stocks dropped. What? Yeah, it's a mystery to me and many others. The story is that investors were afraid that the job market good news could translate into increased inflation, and therefore the Fed would do the unthinkable, raise interest rates, despite Trump screaming for the Fed to lower interest rates. The latest I've heard is the Fed's probably going to keep the rate the same, not lower it, but not raise it. This is paired with concerns that the famous dot-com bubble that burst in 2000-2001 might be repeated with the current high valuations for AI-related stocks. And of course, the market does not like uncertainty, and there's a lot of uncertainty around, including, of course, the Iran conflict. Another financial risk has produced a caution flag by the Treasury Department to U.S. banks. For businesses to deduct wages paid to illegals who cannot legally work in the U.S., they generally need an ID and a bank account, and that means a Social Security number with other ID. Well, if someone is here illegally, they should not be able to get a Social Security number. So, most likely, they're a fake, right? Well, Treasury's warning banks to start being more careful to avoid being part of what is suspected to be a massive number of fake accounts. This crackdown is important since hiring illegals generally means that an American citizen does not have access to that job. What is happening behind the scenes is that employers may knowingly accept false employment credentials, since this allows them to pay below market wages and benefits that a citizen would expect for that job. Seems like there's always something going on. And yes, there is. I've stopped reporting on the rash of frauds against the public program since we're getting almost daily reports of such scandals. The latest is from Ohio, but prior to that, we had Minneapolis, Chicago, and California, and so forth. Again, call for total termination of all federally financed programs that are, in turn, administered by the states. I feel that will fix the problem permanently. If you've enjoyed this segment, please join us on YouTube at Dr. Dave Saves America. American injustice. Dems at all levels have flooded the local, state, and federal courts with some of the worst judges and prosecutors in living memory. Folks, I've been around a while. I've never seen it this bad. It's time for a reckoning. A great example was the invasion of a church service at City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota by a pack of scumballs. There was apparently a rumor going around that one of the preachers was an ICE agent, although I have no confirmation of that. I note that even if there was a preacher who was an ICE agent, this absolutely would not give a single one of the trespassers license to disrupt the church service. Given the violence that has happened at other churches, the parishioners were justifiably scared, along with their children in the church at the time. Suddenly, the St. Paul prosecutor on the case has announced he will not prosecute these church invaders. This disgrace to the justice system claimed that, and I quote, acts of violence, property destruction, or threats to public safety, none of which occurred here, remain serious concerns and will be prosecuted when supported by admissible evidence. Close quote. To enter premises by force and without permission is at the minimum trespassing. Consistent witness reports are that the parishioners were threatened. That is assault. I believe the circumstances justify prosecution. Heck, in Texas, we just shoot them. So take your pick. Shoot them next time, or you prosecute them, you fool. The church is affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. Its attorney spokesperson condemned the announcement by the city attorney. I sure don't blame them. Using the First Amendment to excuse trespass and assault from invaders is a dramatic misuse of the Constitution. This could lead to similar invasions due to lack of serious deterrent. On the plus side, the feds are going to charge the invaders. A federal grand jury has indicted 39 people. I like the fact that former CNN host Don Lemon has been charged. Here's an irony, folks. Lemon, a black man, has been charged under the KKK Act. I can't make this up. Americans need to face this new reality before we become the UK. Most of you have heard about the fatal stabbing of a young man in Southampton, England. He was attacked by a Sikh with a long knife. The irony here is that the victim could not carry a knife, but the assailant could due to his ethnic affiliation. In any event, the victim, Henry Nowak, is laying on the ground bleeding to death, and the cops handcuff him because the murderer claimed Nowak made an ethnic slur. The killer has now been sentenced to life in prison for murder. However, now that the story is out, there have been riots in the UK demanding an end to this perversion of justice, in this case, by the cops. I note in recent UK elections, the Common Sense Party members gained seats. Not a majority, but the whack liberals in charge know that the game is soon to be up. Of course, it's hard to have a consistently just society when protesters here in the U.S. get their way. Some of the so-called sanctuary states are denying federal officials unmarked plates for their safety. And most of you have heard that these same states are trying to ban agents from wearing masks to protect themselves. Of course, during COVID, the same warped states would arrest you for not wearing a mask. Now they will arrest federal officers for wearing them. They're that dumb, folks. In an interesting development, the Senate just approved $70 billion for immigration enforcement. Pardon me while I laugh in the face of the Dems. So that means they got nothing out of their ridiculous and anti-American double shutdowns of parts of the government. Not a single accomplishment by screwing the federal employees and the American people. Remember that when you get to the election in November. The CCP is the enemy of America. I've repeatedly talked about the risk to America from the deranged maniacs running the CCP. That's the Chinese Communist Party. They seem to be very slow learners. America's system of governance and economy is vastly superior to theirs, so they rely on various illegal activities in an attempt to weaken our great country. We have multiple reports of Chinese scientists bringing in viruses, funguses, and other dangerous substances into the U.S. I wonder how many of them have done that and not been caught. Then we have an American working in China who has just admitted to being a long-term spy for the CCP. He is journalist Thomas Palkin II. He just pled guilty to being an unregistered foreign agent for China. He was paid at least $100,000 to infiltrate U.S. political circles, gather intelligence on American targets, and identify potential informants. He is facing 10 years in prison. I think that is far too short a time. And the grand prize goes to the mayor of a small city in California who's just entered into a plea deal that involves admitting to spying for the CCP. Note, I always refer to the CCP, not the Chinese people. The Chinese people are fairly apolitical, which is why the murdering scum in the CCP have been able to get away with so much for so long. Eileen Wang is the former mayor of Arcadia, California. That's a small town near Los Angeles. She is admitted to publishing false stories and other propaganda to bolster the CCP. She faces also as much as 10 years behind bars, and again, it should be much longer. If you've enjoyed this report, remember to like, comment, and subscribe on our channel. Thank you. I'll clip that.